think I have 15 minutes, right, Lacey? Can I pray? Like right now? Okay. That was at the end. Can I do that at the end? If anybody knows Lacey and our relationship, I don't know if she's heard 15 minutes of me speaking in her entire life. So this is actually kind of ironic for me to stand up here and speak in front of everybody. And when she told me I was speaking last night, I think it was a little bit of a shock. But how many people like the theme so far today? So you guys screamed way more for jewelry. Okay. How many like the theme today? So the first time I heard this song, I was actually on my way to work. And you know, my wife and I were foster parents, and we spend a lot of our time taking care of kids. We have 6 right now. That changes week to week. But when I heard the words, be the hope, be the change, be the arms that won't let go, that really ministered to me. And I was like, yes, this is like our theme song. I think I texted it to her and I said, you got to hear this song. It was after I got to work. I wasn't driving. But I really think that message of be a miracle, it speaks to a lot of our hearts that we want to be a part of something more. We feel God's calling us to be something more than just survive or just get by in this life. And so I think that's why that song is so meaningful. And I think that, you know, that's God's message to us, is He doesn't want us just to go through life and wonder if there is more coming. And so I want to start today by looking at the Bible and looking at just an ordinary person like you and I that God uses to do something miraculous. And I picked a story, and I think God led me to the story because it's not one of the big hitters, I don't think. It's not Moses, it's not David, it's not one of these stories that we often hear, but it's a story of an ordinary man. So in Judges chapter 6, we meet a man named Gideon. And if you know anything about that time in history, you know that the Israelites had already come out of Egypt. They've been led through the wilderness. And they had now come into the promised land. They had conquered most of the people there. But after their leaders, Moses and Joshua, had died, they started doing evil in the sight of the Lord. They started worshiping other gods. They had lost their sight of their need for their God. And as a result, God had handed them over to the people of that land. They were being oppressed. And this got so bad that the Israelites had left their towns. They had started hiding in the mountains and in the caves, and they weren't living that life that God had set out for them. And this is where we find Gideon. And this is my first point, is that God uses ordinary people like you and I, and He meets us where we are. He doesn't ask us to be on the mountaintop to use us, but He finds us in our deepest despair, and He asks us to follow Him. And so this is where we meet Gideon in Judges chapter 6, 11 through 12. The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belongs to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Does anybody else find that ironic? What was Gideon doing?
Hiding.
He was hiding. He was in a winepress. That is not where you thresh wheat. I mean, I've never done that before, but I did a little research, and apparently you do that out in the open, so all the stuff goes flying everywhere. And he's sitting in there, and he's probably breathing in all this dust, and this is not where I would go looking for the next person to lead my army. You know, this guy's hiding. He's not a great warrior. But God doesn't see him that way. He sees him as the mighty warrior he's going to be. And God chooses him at that moment. And I think we do that a lot of times ourselves. We start looking at our circumstances, and we start living a life that may not be fulfilling. And we start, hiding, and we start avoiding our troubles, and we find ourselves like Gideon right there in that winepress. But see, I think God saw Gideon as that mighty warrior he was going to be, and I think He sees all of us. He sees us as mighty warriors, who we can be and who we will be. And it says that in 1 Peter, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of this darkness and into a wonderful light." So my question is, do you believe that? Are you living a life that says you believe you are who God says you are? And I think at times I don't. And so I need to go back to His Word, and I need to be reminded, like 1 Peter says, that we are His special possession, and we are heirs to the kingdom. And that should motivate me to step out of that fear that I'm in. But see, Gideon did not do this at first. I don't know if you know the story, but Gideon starts giving all these excuses. And he says, "Pardon me, Lord." Gideon replied, "But if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all the wonders that our ancestors told us about? Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." So he was looking at his circumstances and saying, "God, if you're with us, well, why is all this stuff happening?" So that's his first reply when he's faced with this angel. And then he goes on, but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest of Manasseh, and I am the least of my family. You see, Gideon starts looking at his abilities and starts questioning, I can't do that, God. Look at who I am. I'm a nobody. And that's my second point, is that God is leading him to face his fear. He's going to lead us to face our fears, but then he's always going to provide a way. He's going to show up when we take that step to face that fear. And I see that so many times in foster care. I could go on, and I'll tell a little bit about it in a minute, but so many people come to me and say, I can't do what you do, or there's no way I could say goodbye to a child, or things aren't right in my life right now. And I think we could plug something else in for foster care. Maybe it's speaking to my neighbor, maybe it's going on a mission trip, maybe it's booking another jewelry show, or sharing your testimony at a jewelry show. Whatever that may be, you can fill that blank in. But I think sometimes we start questioning our own ability. But let me encourage you that God doesn't ask you to provide that ability. God doesn't expect you to do it alone. He will provide a way when we are faithful in that. And we see this in how he responds to Gideon. The Lord turned to him and said, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hands. Am I not sending you? And if you know how God refers to himself a lot in the Bible, he always says, I'm the great I am. And when I read that, and you read it again, am I not sending you? He's saying, don't you know who is sending you? Don't you know what I have done? Gideon just listed all these things that had happened. Where are you, God? Didn't you do all these things? And then he's pointing them back to that and saying, aren't I the same God that did all those things? He is the beginning and the creator of the universe and the Alpha and the Omega, and all these things that he's saying, he's pointing Gideon back to that and saying, don't focus on you, focus on me. And I don't think God expects us to provide supernatural abilities. All he expects us to do, like he told Gideon, go in the strength you have. Go in what I've given you, and I'm going to do the rest. And finally, God uses ordinary people, but we have to take the first step. That song speaks to that. Stop sitting around and waiting on a miracle and be one. And that can be discouraging at times, but I think if we look at what Gideon did and what the Lord asked him to do, and I don't have time to go into the whole story. I encourage you to read it for yourself and check, Pastor, make sure I got it right. But Gideon was asked to go and tear down the altar that his father had built. Can you imagine that? Here for years, his father had built this altar to this other god, Baal, and now he's supposed to go tear that down. And I know, some of our fathers would not have taken very well to us tearing something up that he had built. And not only was he to tear it down, he was supposed to then build another altar to God and make a sacrifice on that. So in order to be used by God in this circumstance, Gideon had to turn from his idol and then turn to God and say, okay, I'm ready to follow you. And sometimes we have to do that. So we have to take the first step, but we need to look inside ourselves and say, what might my idol be? What am I afraid to let go of? What am I afraid to turn from in order to trust God? And in my case, I'll speak just from my heart is, when we were called to foster care, comfort, safety, success, how is this going to affect my job? Do I have the time to do this? All those things were fears. And so I ask you, if you have that desire to follow God, you have that calling in your heart, kind of look introspectively first and say, okay, God, do I need to turn from something? But then be like Gideon and take that step. Don't wait. Take the step. And if you know the rest of the story, he did tear down the altar. He did build another altar, turning back to God. And then as a result, 32,000 Israels came out of the mountains. They came out of hiding, and they joined with him to fight the Midianites. However, there were 150,000 Midianites. And so I can't imagine, being called to go fight that battle, as daunting as that may have seemed. But if you know the rest, the continuation of that is God said, that's too many soldiers, Gideon. And, 32,000, you may actually have a chance this time. But I want you to whittle that down to the 300 bravest soldiers. And only then will you give me glory. Only then will I receive the glory for what you're doing. So some of the tasks that God may put before us may seem impossible, but he will always provide a way. And then Gideon went on to defeat the Midianites, and there was peace in the land again. And this is the part where I planned on having a video. There's a family that I really want to recognize, the Jimbaldos, that I think are stepping out in faith and doing something in their community and really being a miracle in a very tough neighborhood and where they live in Alabama. But due to some technical difficulties, that wasn't possible. And Josh looks much more like a mighty warrior than I am, if you've ever seen him. He owns a gym. He's got tattoos. On the designer cruise, everywhere we went, we got hit for drugs. Someone was trying to sell us. And the thing that really struck me about him, though, is when this guy in Jamaica was trying to sell him something. He was the politest guy that he's like, oh man, I appreciate it, thank you, but no thanks. And I wish you could see this video, but we're going to get it posted somewhere on Facebook or social media so you guys can be blessed by their story. But so imagine Josh is up here, tattoos, tough guy. And I'm just going to share a little bit from my heart and where God has led me and how he's answered all these fears and these prayers that I've had. In 2008, my wife and I had our second son. Didn't think this was going to happen. Said it over here and it went well. So I watched my wife. If you know her, she's amazing. She's such full of joy. And I watched my wife go through a period of depression that was, I watched her shrivel into a woman I didn't know. But what God did through that is he broke my heart alongside of that and allowed me to see the brokenness in the world and break my heart for what was breaking his. And she had always wanted to adopt. And that was something I said, no. I have a hard enough time with my kids. There's a lot of kids out there, and that's not something that, there's people that need to adopt, and that's not us. And so through this, I saw a fear in her that I'd never seen. Is she was afraid that if we had another kid, she would go through this again. And I remember the night on the couch where I said, babe, I'm at a place now, if you want to have another child, I'll walk through this with you. And if you don't, and you want to adopt, I'll do that too. And so we took the first step. There were a lot of fears involved. We signed up for MAC classes called Pride Now. We got a license, and we didn't know if we wanted to adopt. We didn't know if we wanted to do foster care. They actually asked you that. Had no idea what we were doing. We knew God had led us to this point. And so, the funny, God's humor is that right after we signed up, we got pregnant again. And so we said, what do we do? Well, God led us to this. He's not going to lead us to this and be unfaithful. So we took the next step. We signed up for classes. And as a result, all the fears I had, how this is going to affect my family, how it's going to affect my children, how it's going to affect me, he wiped all those away. I see my kids learn to love, like at a depth that I've never seen before. To love hard kids that are fun to love. I've learned to love without any expectation of return. And that's hard, letting go of a kid. Guys say that I could never do that. You're right, I can't do it. But God was always faithful. And looking at this, what miracles has God done? I always question, what are we doing? These babies will never remember me. But then he reminds me, and he says, he's a God of redemption. And I look back at times that I didn't see what God was doing. I look at these other moms that had lost their children, and when I didn't agree with it at the time, I can look back now and I saw a mom who was given no chance to get her child back, who was in an abusive situation, who escaped that abuse, got a job, got an apartment, and got her daughter back. And I didn't agree with it at the time, but looking back, I was like, no, that was a miracle to her. It wasn't for me. And then I've seen another mom who I have a hard time agreeing with this one, addicted to drugs for so long. And because the system is so backed up, 6 months go by and she suddenly decides to start testing negative on drug tests. And I had to hand her son. It wasn't her, but she was given another chance. And looking back, God has said, yes, but I'm a God of second chances. And this mom has got another chance to be a mom, or at least be in her son's life. And so that was a miracle. And that wasn't something for me, that was something for her. And I got to witness it. I didn't do it because God took me kicking and screaming, down to this town and dropped this baby off. And I was like, God, this is not right. But he said, yes, it's good. And I love her too. So I leave you with this. So we can stop crying and we can go on giving away jewelry. What things are God calling to you to do? What is that nagging in your heart been in the last couple of weeks? Because I think you're here for a reason. And I prayed a lot. Say, God, you got to give me some words because, Lacey hasn't given me very many in the past. So these got to be important. what are you here? What is nagging your heart? What is God asking you to do? And what fears are you going to have to face? Are you ready to face those fears? What idols may you have to turn from? And then are you willing to trust what God says about you? Are you willing to trust that He will provide a way? And despite all your fears and your inadequacies and the thousand reasons I could tell you I should not be able to take care of children, like what are you ready to take that step and trust God to provide a way? So I love the language in the wardrobe, and I love just how C.S. Lewis ties all that into Scripture and the Gospel. And so I want to leave you with one of my favorite quotes from him. So, safe, says Mr. Beaver. Don't you hear what Miss Beaver tells you? Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe. But he's good. He's the king, I tell you. So I believe God is doing miracles in all of our lives, but I believe He's doing miracles in ordinary people all around us, and I invite you to be one today. Thank you.